Azor, and today I would like to discuss about how China's policy has affected to its economy. So let's jump right into it. After the end of Mao Zedong's leadership in the 1970s, China's achieved one of the biggest economy in the world. However, unlike the other developed countries, the country is run by communists. Since the birth of communist China, the country has operated by a single party called Communist Party of China. If you had a chance to time travel to Mao Zedong's China, the country will be different from today. During the 1970s, China was an agricultural country and it was extremely poor. But a few years after Mao has died, a man known as Deng Xiaoping came to power, and he immediately practiced a set of measures that would change the China forever. Deng Xiaoping was a turning point for the China. Since then, China has undergone the greatest economical revolution in the history of mankind. During the last 3 decades, China has managed to take 500 million people out of poverty and become the largest industrial and trading power on the planet. However, there is still a lot of poverty in China, but compared to how it was, it's a whole lot better today. In 2013, there was a once-in-a-decade transfer of power. Xi Jinping replaced Hu Jintao as the president. She promised to reform and rebalance China's economy. After that, government led by Xi abandoned one-China policy, cracked down on bribe-taking and spear tax to make the currency more tradable. But after the economy ran out of steam, in 2015, growth slowed to 6.9%, which is the weakest point in a quarter of century. Previous booming stock market triggered the epic burst that wiped out $5 trillion value. After discussing about the history of China's policy and economy, let's talk about how cultures impact the business. China believes in working hard, making more money, and having better life. Laziness and slackness is considered a shame. So in China, people are material and they want to have good things like big house, nice cars, brand names, clothes and shoes. To achieve this goal, they can work very hard. Chinese are mild, non-violent in nature, and very few are prone to commit crime. Chinese are quick to learn, and that is why they can catch up and advance technology in a short time. After that, I would like to discuss about political and economic system of the country and how they may affect the business. Okay, China has a culture of trade due to the Asia trade and the One China policy that was in place from 1979 to 2015. And it has one of the highest savings rates in the world due to the culture of trade. Among other factors, China has been experiencing a relatively slow growth of consumption expenditure, which has led to a relatively slow growth of aggregate demand and resulting in a slow growth of economy. However, with the culture of trade, therefore a high savings rate in China, and the supply of loanable funds is relatively high, and therefore interest rates are relatively low, which has led to a relatively fast growth of investment expenditure, and this has led to a fast growth of aggregate demand and resulting in a few growth of the economy. For its huge size and the speed at which this country is growing, China deserves to be given the chef role in this superproduction that is changing our planet. But let's not rush into this whole thing. China is not perfect. Indeed, the country has some major problems. The thing is China has facing 2 major threats in the last year: less growth and much more debt. In fact, this has even led to an important question, can China go bankrupt? Have a quick look at this chart, which shows what happened to China's debt in the last few years. As you can see, it goes up continuously, but on the other hand, look closely at what has happened to Chinese economic growth. As you can see, this chart headed the opposite direction. So in other words, in China, the economy is declining and debt won't stop rising. In growth terms, the Chinese debt has multiplied by 4 since 2007. And who causes this nightmare? Of course, the government policy. In 2017, the Chinese debt is equal more than 260% of the GDP, and many analysts consider this number to be very high for a country that is yet to become one of the richest in the world. Most of the debts are the responsibility of the Chinese Chinese company because much of the debt has financed the expansion of Chinese companies. Throughout China, there are hundreds of cities that have almost like everything one needs for a model, like urban lifestyles, high-rise apartment complexes, developed waterfronts and skyscraper and even public art. Everything that is except one major factor, that's people. So you can get the idea of the side of all of that has been built in China in the last few years. But pay attention to the following number. In just 3 years, China has used more concrete than the United States in the entire 20th centuries. And as I said, everything, like absolutely everything, has been paid for with debt. So now we come to really important questions. What has happened to this country to cause to get into so much debt? For the last few decades, if you could say that Chinese people were good at one thing, it would be saving money, especially the oldest Chinese citizens. They work and save. That is all they do. So thanks to all that effort, China has had high investment rates, but what has happened in the last years has nothing to do with that. So let's go back to the 2008. At the time, all developed countries were going through a major financial crisis, and you can probably imagine how this affected China's export, which are the engine that keeps driving the China's forward. The truth is that at the time, the Chinese government was terrified that this country would be affected by the international crisis. In order to prevent it, they came up with the idea that the economic system had to be transformed and they had to bet on domestic demand. And when it comes from the amount of the politician, the domestic demand thing almost always means like they are planning to start overspending. In 2008, Chinese government started a colossal program of extra public spending of 4 trillion years in buildings like high-speed trains, underground highways, houses, and something like that. But they went further. The government thought that their overspending was not enough, so they encouraged two companies to do the same way. The companies decided to do the traditional remedy. Like in 2008, China also started one of the most expensive monetary policies ever known. Authorities lowered the interest rates and bank gave many loans to everyone who asked for them. And they practically established an open bar of like cheap loans. The housing and apartments became more expensive, and companies started to make all kinds of investment. They built ghost towns, bought out companies all over the world, and engaged in all kinds of projects. Obviously, many of the business are not profitable. After all, the central bank was pretty much giving money away, so the companies cannot give them money back. So what do they do then? Well, they simply ask for new loans to pay back the old ones, and the snowball kept rolling and getting bigger and bigger. And this is how the Chinese economy became addicted to debt. More than half of the bank debt in China consists of loans from state-owned banks to the state-owned enterprises. Let's talk about China's banking system and how it's different from others. China's next financial crisis is lurking in the shadows of the shadows banking, and China is stacking up like $9 trillion on the edge of a cliff. What is a shadow banking? It is like the evil twin of regular banking. Shadow banking involves lots of money and lots of risks, and it is tied to China crazy investment boom. China's economic boom and its reliance on the shadow banking is similar in some way to the US economic boom in 2007. This happened after the failure of a single investment bank had a domino effect on the entire global financial system. Trillions of dollars were lost, and so were millions of jobs. Well, it has been 10 years since then, but now the same kind of boom and crash could happen in China, and for the same kind of reasons. So let's get back on the track. Shadow banking is like when banks or the companies that are not banks lend money outside of the normal structure of banks like deposits and loans. And here is a simplified explanation. In the traditional banking system, if a business owner wants to grow his business, he goes to a bank and that bank loans him money. Over time, he repays that money to the bank and interest. Let's say a single bank makes 100 loans and is pretty careful about who it loans to. but even so, some of their business will fail. So Chinese regulation requires that the bank set aside money to cover their potential losses, but shadow banking operate outside the traditional system. So let's say 100 business want loans, and shadow banking packages like those 100 potential loans into what is called a wealth management project. Then it goes to an investor and sell this wealth management project by claiming it has high interest rate. When those 100 business repay, the investors will get their investment back plus a lot of interest. So this is shadow banking, and sometimes the loaner is not even a bank. It is just a regular company that packages investment. Sometimes the business that want money might be a local government that want to build like a bridge. This shadow banking has much higher risk than the normal banking and result in the destroying the economy. According to 2016 report, shadow bank loans now make up 57% of all loans in China. There are some unethical action in Chinese banks that seriously affects the economy. We've already seen how China is currently going through a debt overdose. But if this was not enough, there is another danger hiding in the bushes, like a bank in the shadows. Banks face like certain limitations on the amount of money they can loan, but Chinese banks have managed to skip these controls and in a way. So these banks have copied what American banks did with their mortgages. So instead of giving loans, and when you look at their bank accounts are not issued as loans, but rather as other investment. Well, it is estimated that Chinese banks have hidden more than like $2 trillion, and it has a straightforward consequence. Chinese banks can be way less like solvent than their official numbers might indicate. And besides, much of this debt is opaque, and so the actual debt in China could be much higher. So how is China going to solve this mess, and what are the government planning now? According to analysis, China economic growth took at 6.9% in 2017, better than expected, but far from the astronomical 10 plus growth several years before. With a 6.9% growth rate, the world's second largest economy still contributed 50% of global GDP, roughly equivalent in size to the GDP of France, UK, India, Brazil, Italy, and Canada, all of them combined. China's economy in 2018 faces like many challenges, including rising protectionism around the world and possible trade war with the US. While China's economic miracle continues through 2018, what are China's plans for economic development? All of this was highlighted in BOE Forum for Asia, which is held in April. What we learned from the conference is that firstly, China will stop delaying reform. China facilitates reforming system since the late 1970s. For years on, the drive is still ongoing and has gained momentum under President Xi Jinping leadership. China mapped down its economic plan for 2018, and they are changing from fast growth to high equality development. Secondly, China will focus on preventing risks. Diffusing risks is a top priority for Chinese government this year, and it won't be a bed of roses. Shadow banking, real estate financing, and web-based financing are the main major concerns for Chinese authorities. Finally, poverty alleviation. The dream of wiping poverty will soon turn into reality in China. Over 68.53 million people shook off poverty over the past 5 years, with 30.46 million in the countryside still living below poverty line. This year target is to bring 10 million people out of poverty, and China had journey is getting harder. To be concluded, China's communist government policies and banking system has driven the country into crisis, and analysts are warning if they do not stop this debt, China could become a new Japan, and country that has been in crisis since 1918. So thank you for watching and have a great day.